I was certain that now I really had seen everything there was to experience as a social worker. The memory of those eyes that burned like embers and the unnatural way the girl's body had moved still woke me up screaming in the night. John didn't understand what was troubling me so. How could he, when I didn't even understand what had unfolded myself? Needless to say, I was ready for things to get back to normal. I welcomed the daily grind, losing myself in my work with mundane cases of unbathed children and too small clothes. These were all solved with a quick meeting with the parents and some resources for the government assistance. Things were on the right track, and I could almost forget about the horrors I had witnessed with the Evans. It was only a matter of time before my peaceful bubble popped. John and I were out to dinner at a trendy new ramen shop that had opened up nearby, enjoying 2 warm bowls of noodles and broth when my phone rang. I glanced down at where rested by my hand on the table, and a cold dread seeped through my bones as my caller ID informed me it was Vicky. I stared at the phone vibrating away on the table, letting it ring far too long. "Don't you need to answer that?" John asked around a mouthful of noodles, his words muffled comically as he slurped them down. With a shaky hand, I lifted the phone to my ear. "Hey Vicky, what's up?" I said as I rose from my seat, weaving my way through the tables and out the front door to hear her better. I stuffed my free hand in my pocket and hunched my shoulders against the frigid winter breeze. "Miranda, good you answered," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "I hate to do this to you, especially after... well, you know," she said, skirting around the traumatic memory. "I tried to call Lisa and Mark, but neither of them were answering their damn phones." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Of course they weren't answering. They were probably too busy knocking boots. Vicky, however, was unaware of their unsanctioned relationship between the two. So I kept my mouth shut and did my job. "It's fine, Vicky. I understand. What's going on?" My only consolation was knowing that Mark and Lisa would owe me big time when they found out I covered for them. Vicky was silent for a moment, and I almost thought she had hung up until I heard her sigh through the speaker. "This one's a little strange, Miranda." I groaned inwardly. Strange was the last thing I wanted right now. Landlord called the preset non-emergency line, but still warrants a checkup. The tenants are a young couple, been married a few years and no prior history. Larry and Joanne McCormick. When he got to the apartment, he said there were 2 kids there, a boy and a girl. Looked to be about 10 years old, maybe as old as 12, he wasn't sure. "Okay, so what's the problem?" I asked, knowing there was about to be a big old but somewhere. "Well, the landlord said these tenants don't have kids," Vicky said. I opened my mouth to respond, but Vicky cut me off. "I know what you're gonna say, but listen. The landlord told the station this couple had been trying to have kids for years, and they've never been able to. He's worried they snatched these kids. So why are you calling me? Why aren't the cops there?" I asked, my brows furrowed together in confusion. "The kids don't appear to be hurt or anything, and they don't match any missing person reports. The landlord tried to make conversation with the kids, but they wouldn't answer him. He asked the couple where they came from, and said they got real cagey. Larry said they were his sister's kids, and Joanne said they were babysitting for a coworker. The station was hoping you could get a more straightforward answer. Maybe talk to the kids. Everyone knows your reputation, Miranda," Vicky stated. I could tell she was trying to stroke my ego, and damn if it didn't work. I was great at what I did, no doubt about it, and that was why they had called me. "Alright, send me the address and I'll head over now," I said before stuffing the phone back in my jacket pocket. I headed back inside to grab my purse. By the time I arrived at the towering brick apartment building in Upper Manhattan, it was late. It was late enough that most people were turning in for the night, and the streets were relatively quiet for a Monday evening in the city. I nodded in acknowledgement to the patrol car station across the street as I approached the glass double doors. I hit each button in the matrix on the panel beside the door, and it didn't take long before the shrill buzz of the door unlocking sounded and I entered the building. Up on the 5th floor, I searched the hall until I found the apartment I was looking for. 512. I knocked lightly, waiting for a response. The door promptly swung open and a slim blonde woman answered, eyeing me warily. "Hi, Joanne. My name is Miranda. I'm with Child Protective Services." I raised my hands in a peaceful gesture as her eyes turned flighty. I could tell she was considering slamming the door in my face. It happened too many times not to recognize. "It's okay. I'm just here to talk. If your landlord was concerned about some kids you're watching, I just need to make sure they're okay and then we can all get on with our night." She nibbled her lip nervously, pondering her choice. Through the open door, I saw a tall, broad-shouldered man approach us. His blonde hair slightly unkempt and his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "It's alright, Joanne. Let her in. The kids are fine. There's nothing to see here," he said, his tone firm. I thanked him and entered the apartment. It was no penthouse suite, but it was still much more extravagant than most could afford, especially in this neighborhood. Countless pieces of fine art and sculptures decorated the room, and I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Not many people would be brave enough to display a Lalique Tourbillon's vase within the reach of clumsy children. "They're my sister's kids. She's out of the country. which is what I told the officer. We can't reach her now, but I assure you she knows they're here, Larry said, and I tucked that information away in the back of my mind. I knew the station was probably already running whatever name he had given them and digging into his background. If there was a sister, they'd find her. Do you mind if I talk to the kids? I asked. Joanne nodded, and the couple led me down the hall to the large bedroom. The soft, mournful notes of Chopin drifted through the open doorway from a stereo situated on the nightstand. A young boy and girl sat side by side on the floor, motionless. They both had pin-straight, jet-black hair and wore matching pair of plaid pajamas. Their heads were tilted downwards, a pair of dark sunglasses obscuring their eyes from me. That's Sean and that's Samantha. They're visually impaired, Joanne explained as I approached the children. They didn't acknowledge me at all, even when I introduced myself. Are they hearing impaired as well? I asked, crouching down in front of the kids. Larry stepped into the room, crossing his arms over his chest. No, they're just shy. Joanne entered next, kneeling next to the kids. She leaned in and whispered something in Sean's ear, then Samantha's. Miss McCormick, I want to have to ask you not to whisper. I need to make sure you're not swaying them to say something untrue, I chided, a warning tone in my voice. She nodded and stepped back towards her husband. As she did, the twins raised their heads perfectly in sync and said, Hello, Miss Miranda. An uneasy chill ran down my spine and goosebumps danced across my skin. That foreboding sense of dread began to fill me again, and I struggled for composure. Hello, Sean, Samantha, it's nice to meet you two. Do you know why I'm here? They nodded synchronously. Good. Can you tell me if you're supposed to be here? Once more the twins nodded. My unease grew as I questioned these unnerving children. I need you to think carefully about this next one. Do you feel safe here? Two onyx-haired heads bobbed in agreement. I sighed, my discomfort mounting with each second. At that moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I discreetly slipped out and glanced at the screen to see a text from Vicky. Larry doesn't have any siblings. The officer stationed outside is on his way up. My blood ran cold as I read the message, but I forced myself to remain calm. Can you tell me who your parents are? I asked. The twins nodded and in tandem each raised a hand pointing behind me. I stood and turned to face Larry and Joanne, my arms folded across my chest as I waited for them to respond. Joanne broke first, rushing forward and scooping the children protectively into her arms. Please don't take them! You don't understand, we've wanted children for so long! Larry positioned himself between me and his family, his chin raised menacingly. We didn't abduct these kids, we adopted them. We lied because... well, we didn't exactly go through the proper channels. We've been on a waiting list for so long. We chose a more unorthodox method, he explained, choosing his words carefully. I took a slow step back, not liking the dangerous gleam in his eye. I understand, but you have to do it the right way. What was your plan in the long run? When they need to be enrolled in schools and get social security cards or go to the doctor? We would have figured it out, Larry shouted. If I hadn't been in this situation a million times before, I would have flinched at his tone. But I knew now the most important thing was staying calm until the officer from the squad car below could make it up here. I was so focused on Larry, I almost missed what happened next. Slowly, the children's movements still completely in sync. They raised their hands to their faces and removed their sunglasses. I gasped as I was inexplicably struck by sheer, blinding terror. The twins' eyes were entirely black, their irises swimming pools of obsidian. My heart slammed against my ribs frantically as my fight-or-flight responses warred with each other, and all I could do was stand there, immobile as I stared into their inky depths. Larry! Joanne yelled, grabbing the glasses and trying to force them back onto the children's faces. Sean raised a hand and swatted her away like a fly, sending her sprawling across the floor without ever taking his eyes off me. Larry's true colors finally showed, and without even a glance at his helpless wife, he sprinted out of the room, slamming the door shut and locking it behind him. I was trapped. As hard as I tried to wrestle my gaze away from their ominous stare, I was unable to do more than stand there. It was as if I had no control of my body. The terror was so overwhelming. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the blood in my ears, and feel the trembling of my body. Sean and Sam took a synchronized step towards me, then another, and the lights in the room flickered. I watched in horror as the small, round faces in front of me began to droop, their skin stretching and dripping. You should have left us alone, they said. The timbre of their voice was much lower than should have been possible at their age. They stepped closer together and a scream lodged itself in my throat, unable to escape as the two children began to melt together. Their flesh stretched and fused grotesquely, their small bodies morphing before my eyes and growing inexplicably in size. The sounds of bones popping and cracking filled the room, the lights flashing in and out as the metamorphosis progressed. The eerie children that had been there only a moment before were now unrecognizable, and a hideous abomination stood before me. It stood on all fours with its arms and legs perpendicular to its pale, emaciated body like that of a spider. A slim serpentine neck held up in an unnaturally elongated face, its cheeks and eyes sunk in hollows, and its mouth a gaping, black void. Joanne was in the corner behind them, sobbing uncontrollably. Whether it be from fear or sorrow at what had become of her children, I couldn't tell. "Sean, Samantha, stop this, please. We're supposed to be a family," she pleaded uselessly. "Don't make them take you away." The creature's head whipped around, its neck folding backwards so that I could look at her without moving its body. Joanne flinched before shakily rising to her feet, hesitantly approaching the perversion of nature. She raised a trembling hand as if to soothe it as she advanced. The monstrosity tilted its head curiously as if pondering whether she was friend or foe. I thought I saw a hint of recognition flash across its murky eyes as it regarded her cautiously. A wavering smile pulled at Joanne's lips, and it seemed as if the crisis had been averted. Joanne never could have seen it coming. In a flash, too fast for any human eye to catch, more than a blur of motion, the abomination's jaw unhinged, engulfing her outstretched hand and snapping shut like a vice around her shoulder. Joanne's screams rocked me where I stood as wet, crimson blood splattered across the cream-colored walls. While the creature was distracted, my eyes scanned the room wildly for a way to escape. We were on the 5th floor. If I went out the window, I wouldn't survive. I slowly backed towards the door, my hand fumbling with the knob, but it was futile. The door was locked tight. As the creature heard my vain attempts at freedom, its head snapped back around to face me. Its meal forgone for the moment. The thing's mouth gaped open, slowly expanding wider and wider. From that yawning darkness, a low, creaking groan emanated. The vulgar sound raked over my skin like nails on a chalkboard. With my back pressed against the door and the loathsome atrocity descending upon me, I squeezed my eyes shut and sucked in a breath, waves of fear pulsing through me in time with the frantic beating of my heart. I sent up a silent goodbye to John, tears leaking from my eyes as I took what I thought was my final breath. Suddenly the door vibrated against my back as someone banged against it, and the creature went silent at the sound of the intrusion. I hesitantly peeked an eye open, just in time to see the monstrosity skittering up the wall and through the open bedroom window, disappearing from sight. I was in too much shock to speak when the police finally broke through the door. From what they had managed to deduce from my unintelligible mumblings, the children and Larry had managed to escape. They pinned Joanne's murder on her missing husband, and all the units throughout the city were placed on high alert, but I feared they would never find him. As I was ushered out of the crime scene into an ambulance to be examined, I cast a wary glance back at the apartment building. In the moonlight, I could just barely discern an unnaturally large, thin figure creeping along the rooftops, its serpentine neck upturned to the bright, luminescent sphere.